Listen, bro. Niggas ain't saying, man, that nigga there, woo, woo, woo. And his brother go shoot at us. That nigga brother pull a gun out on Big U, nigga.
What if a Halloween night in South Central Los Angeles turned from tragedy into an explosive showdown? New footage has just dropped showing the brother of the late Nipsey Hussle pulling off a revenge hit that has already gone viral. After Big U's son, Jabari "Baby Wee" Henley, was brutally assassinated last night, the city erupted in shock, only to find the backlash from Nipsey's affiliates escalating into a full-blown feud. In this video, we pull back the curtain on the latest clip, revealing how Nipsey's brother takes the fight to Big U and sends ripples through the entire hip-hop community. Stay tuned. We break down the scene, the motives, and what this could mean for the streets and the culture that's been simmering since 2019. The stakes are higher than ever. Let's dive in. The night of October 31st, 2025 should have been a lull in the rhythm of South Central Los Angeles, a quiet after the midnight buzz of trick-or-treaters and the last throes of Halloween block parties. Instead, a call crackled into the 77th Street Division's radio, the words "shots fired" cutting through the humid air of a downtown district that had for years been a stage for a different kind of performance. The location was the corner of South Figueroa and West 69th, a block steeped in the history of the rolling 60s Crips and a neighborhood that had seen its share of violence and resilience. Here, the little smoke shop known as Fig and 69 had become the backdrop to a tragedy that would reverberate far beyond the borders of the neighborhood. It was just after 11:10 p.m. when a dark-coated sedan, likely a Toyota Camry or Honda Accord, pulled up to the curb. Witnesses described a scene that felt like a reenactment of a crime film, but it was all too real. Jabari Henley, a 34-year-old son of the famed rap icon Eugene "Big U" Henley, was standing on the sidewalk, a lanky figure of 6'1" and 210 pounds, when the driver stepped out. In a swift, brutal moment, the driver opened fire. The paramedics who arrived minutes later found Jabari already lying on the pavement, blood pooling under his shoes, his life slipping away in a matter of seconds. The shooting was not a spontaneous act of a passerby. Surveillance footage from the businesses lining the block and a dozen separate camera feeds were later stitched together by the LAPD's homicide squad to construct a timeline that left little room for doubt about the deliberate nature of the attack. The footage, once released, became a haunting visual of the city's emergency services doing CPR on Jabari, as the city's police scanner reports flickered across screens and phones. Within a matter of hours, a graphic clip of the paramedics' efforts was posted by an anonymous account on TikTok, racked up 3.2 million views by noon on November 1st, and sent a ripple of shock through the very fabric of the community. Jabari's death struck a different chord than many expected. To those who had grown up with Big U's music, the image of the rap legend's son, who had chosen a path that seemed to diverge from the streets' hardened politics, lay at the center of an almost mythic narrative. Jabari was more than a footnote in a legend's life. He was a living testament to the possibility of carving out a new lane in the heart of a community that too often feels cornered by its own history. A local barber who'd worked in Jabari's neighborhood for years recalled, "He wasn't a fighter, he was a kid who looked a lot older." You'd see him as a solid dude, straight up. That's who he was. These words painted a portrait of a man who was deeply rooted in his family's legacy, but who also had the courage to walk a different path. Family ties were frayed and then stretched across a continent in the wake of the murder. Eugene "Big U" Henley, then 58, was already locked away in the Metropolitan Detention Center in downtown Los Angeles, awaiting bail after federal prosecutors had filed a RICO indictment in March that year. The charges, 43 counts alleging a sprawling mafia-like operation tied to extortion, human trafficking, bank fraud, and even a hit on a rapper in Vegas, had left Eugene unable to watch his own son's final breaths. The method of communication that delivered the devastating news to Eugene was chillingly cold. A co-defendant, Loose Cannon, a music executive also entangled in the same RICO case, managed to contact his cell phone, contraband or not, and whispered the sorrowful words into the night. Big U just froze, Cannon later recounted to TMZ. He didn't say much at first, tears streaming, fists clenched. The image of a father who could not stand in his son's last moments, hearing the death over a whispered call in the cell, underscored the brutal isolation of the prison system. Jabari's story was not just his own. It was woven into a tapestry of siblings who had each carved unique spaces within the city's cultural and professional landscape. His brother, Diane Henley, a linebacker for the LA Chargers, tweeted a heartbreaking message on November 1st. "My heart is shattered. Rest easy, bro. We got the fam." Another brother, Michael Henley, who cut hair in Hawthorne, kept a low profile, but was seen in the streets with the same steady composure that had defined his brother's demeanor. Cherise Henley, a nurse in Long Beach, found herself suddenly thrust into the national spotlight, as the city's grief morphed into a platform for speculation and conspiracy. The Henley children, each living their lives on distinct paths, were suddenly connected by a tragedy that seemed to cut across every lane they had chosen. The internet's response to Jabari's death was immediate and merciless, reflecting a deep undercurrent of unresolved anger and betrayal that had been simmering in the rap scene since Nipsey Hussle's murder in March 2019. Within the first 90 minutes of the police scanner alert, posts linked Jabari's death to an old conspiracy theory that suggested Eugene "Big U" Henley had orchestrated or at least profited from the 2019 killing of Nipsey Hussle. By 6 a.m. on November 1st, the hashtag #BabyHenley was trending, and mentions of Big U's son had exploded from a modest 2,500 posts to a staggering 15,000. In a flood of TikTok videos, graphic footage of paramedics performing CPR, posted anonymously, garnered over 3 million views by noon. Instagram reels from fan pages that had once celebrated Nippy's music began reposting clips that merged mourning for the late rapper with accusations that Big U was somehow complicit, an act of digital karma that turned grief into entertainment. The narrative that spread through the algorithms was less about seeking justice and more about celebrating a perceived divine retribution. Users posted screenshots of older interviews, resurfacing in 2021, where figures like Charleston White and Loose Cannon had made bold claims about Big U's involvement in Nippy's death. The clips were repurposed with fresh tags like "Karma Back" and "Nip Revenge" and rethreaded into a story that seemed to fit the cultural mythos of the neighborhood. It was a narrative built on rumors that had survived the court trial in 2022, where the alleged involvement of Big U in the murder of Nippy was never brought up in the transcripts. Despite this, the internet's appetite for conspiracy did not wane. It merely evolved, finding new ammunition in the form of old, unverified clips that were reshared with the fervor of a viral challenge.
He wanted to leave a bad deal that he'd got into with Big U's unique label.
So I signed him to it was signed to a 10-year production contract. It started in.
The digital backlash against Big U's family was not limited to the South Central streets. Across every platform, X, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, comments piled up, some in the form of respectful tributes, but the majority became a battleground of speculation. The algorithms that fueled the content were unselective, presenting any user with a mix of heartfelt condolences and baseless accusations. By the end of the first 24 hours, the number of users posting about Big U's son had increased by a factor of 6, while the number of posts containing the hashtag #BabyHenley had grown more than 6-fold. In the world of social media, the tragedy was quickly repackaged into a narrative that fed into a pre-existing myth of karma and supernatural retribution, perpetuating a cycle of anger that had no place in an already grieving community. The story of Jabari's death unfolded against the backdrop of lingering resentment toward the late Nipsey Hussle, a rapper whose own murder had shocked the scene in 2019. The rumors that Big U had profited from the label that had signed Nippy, or that he had colluded with the convicted Rollin' 60s member Eric Holder Jr. had circulated for years. These rumors had been debunked during Holder's trial, where Big U's name never appeared in the transcripts. Yet, the internet thrives on speculation, and these old theories found new life in the most virally resonant way. The resurfacing of a 2021 interview with Charleston White on November 1st, in which he claimed that Big U had hired a shady deal for Nippy, further fueled the narrative. His words, "Let them think they killed Nip, but it was Eric who did it. If you follow the details, Nip and Big U got into it," were quickly repurposed by users who were eager to find the villain in a story that seemed too cleanly wrapped up. The effect on the Henley family was devastating. Eugene Big U Henley found out his son had been murdered while locked inside a maximum security facility, an indictment that had already turned him into a figure of controversy. He was unable to see his son's face for the last time, unable to be there for the final moments that had slipped through his prison cell's thin glass. The emotional toll of a father who had never lived to see his own child's life end, only through the whisper of a contraband phone, was a stark reminder of how the prison system could become an isolating prison of its own. "We're both shattered," Loose Cannon, a co-defendant, said in a later interview. "Heartbroken and devastated doesn't cover it. We'll work through this together, even from in here." The tone of those words was a bitter cocktail of grief and resignation, an acknowledgement that sometimes the only comfort comes from a shared sense of loss. While the internet was churning with speculation and conspiracy, LAPD's South Bureau Homicide Division was piecing together a different puzzle. 17 cameras on the block, the feed from a nearby corner store, the drone footage from the night. 12 surveillance videos were scrutinized to identify the suspect's face, the driver's license plates, the bullet trajectories. A reward of $50,000 was posted, a figure that represented the city's commitment to cracking the case. Yet even with the monetary incentive, no arrests were made in the days that followed. The open case stood as a reminder of the challenges that law enforcement faces in a city where distrust and fear often outweigh the pursuit of justice. In the days that followed, the Henley family was forced to navigate a world that had turned a personal tragedy into a public spectacle. Social media was a battlefield, and every post that seemed like a genuine expression of grief was quickly hijacked by users who saw an opportunity to link the murder back to the decades-old allegations that had haunted Big U. The hashtags that trended across the city's network of users, "Cost Big U," "Baby Henley," were nothing more than a surface layer to a deeper cultural crisis. The underlying narrative of a karmic retribution seemed to echo an old story that had always been about power, betrayal, and violence. But it had now been amplified and repurposed by a digital culture that was more interested in assigning blame than offering solace. The story of Jabari's death was, and perhaps still remains, a stark reminder that in a community marked by violence, every narrative, whether personal or cultural, has the potential to be weaponized. The Henley family's tragedy was compounded by the digital backlash that turned them into targets of anger that had been smoothed out by the courts, but that were now back in circulation on every platform. As the city's streets are already layered with the ghosts of past violence, the Henley family, like so many others, found themselves navigating a complicated landscape that was no longer simply about finding a murderer, but about confronting a community's readiness to assign blame. The story of Jabari's death, a son who walked a different path, was a tragedy that became a symbol of a larger battle in a community where anger, distrust, and conspiracy still linger. The Henley family had to reconcile the loss of their son with the harsh reality that an internet of suspicion and rumors could be as deadly as any bullet that fell from a weapon. As the Henley family continues to mourn, the world continues to chase a myth of retribution that has no place in a culture that must, at its core, move past old grievances and focus on healing. The story ends up being a call to action. A community that must decide whether to allow the internet to continue turning personal tragedies into a weaponized narrative or to stand for healing and justice. The Henley family's tragedy is a stark reminder that the pursuit of truth and healing can sometimes be drowned out by an unrelenting wave of speculation. The digital world has become a double-edged sword, especially in this case, where a man already on the brink of further imprisonment is forced to confront an unimaginable grief behind a federal lockup. Eugene Big U, once a symbol of community building and a catalyst for peace in the streets of Los Angeles, now finds his name tarnished by unverified claims that have taken root in the algorithmic soil of social media. The timing is brutal. He is facing federal charges, his legal representation abandoned, and now, from behind bars, he must mourn the loss of his son, Jabari, a young man who was caught in a tragedy that had nothing to do with the violence that the internet believed he had caused. The internet's influence on how we process loss, seek justice, and uphold truth has never been clearer. Grief that once might have stayed within a family circle is now broadcast to millions. In this story, the Henley family, dealing with the double blow of a son's death and the freezing of their assets due to RICO repercussions, is quietly arranging a funeral under a temporary memorial tent scheduled for November 8th. The decision to keep the arrangements private stems from the painful realization that any public display would only amplify the already negative narrative that has been cultivated around Big U. Behind the scenes, the police investigation continues. As of early November, the Los Angeles Police Department has processed 12 surveillance videos, awaiting the release of ballistics and toxicology reports that should arrive by November 5th. The two persons of interest initially linked to Inglewood, neither directly tied to the Rolling 60s, have been released after alibis were verified. Yet, forensic DNA evidence found on the sedan's door handle shows a partial match to a Hoover affiliate.
May have been Big U who was using Nipsey's tours as a cover to smuggle drugs to different cities, and this was possibly making Nipsey nervous and looking for ways out.
I think Big U was using the tour bus, Nipsey's tour bus.
This is what internal LAPD memos call spillover retaliation, though it is far from the type of vengeance people were chanting about on the platforms. This is a stark reminder that the internet's amplification can distort reality. The online narrative of Big U as an architect of retaliation was built on baseless rumors, and the algorithmic feed allowed those narratives to flourish despite the absence of concrete evidence. In the case of Jabari's murder, the evidence points to a more subtle and less predictable pattern. Forensic analysis indicates that the partial match to a Hoover affiliate suggests a possible spillover into a broader conflict within the community, but it does not align with the narrative of targeted revenge that the internet has fueled. This disconnect is emblematic of the broader problem: the internet's capacity to shape public perception in ways that are often disconnected from the reality on the ground. The story of Big U's partnership with Nipsey Hussle is particularly compelling. It began in 2008 when both men, emerging from different backgrounds, decided to collaborate for community betterment. Their first joint venture, the Unity in the Community event at Limer Park in 2010, drew a crowd of 800 people and showcased how music and mediation could coexist. The event was a testament to their shared goal, using creative expression to mend broken relationships. This partnership only grew stronger as they collaborated on projects such as the Block by Block series and the Grammy-nominated Victory Lap album. The synergy was undeniable. The partnership seemed to be a model of how community leaders can use influence to foster unity. However, as Nipsey's career skyrocketed and he began establishing his own enterprises, tensions began to surface. Rumors of beef started swirling around late 2018. Nipsey wanted to exit his unique deal early and launched Marathon Clothing under his own banner.
While Big U was present at the store opening, he cryptically posted on X. The platform was already a breeding ground for rumors. A single cryptic post could ignite speculation, especially when combined with images of Eric Holder at the same event. The potential for misunderstanding and rumor is amplified in such environments. The narrative that erupted in July 2020, accusations that Big U vouching for Eric Holder, spun out 50,000 engagements, amplifying rumors and causing damage to both parties. When Nipsey was tragically murdered on March 31, 2019, Big U's reaction was immediate. He organized an April 2nd unity march that pulled 5,000 people from rival gangs, demanding a truce. At the memorial service, he delivered a eulogy that reflected his deep respect for Nipsey. "He was my son in spirit." These actions were a testament to his role as a peacemaker, not a perpetrator. Unfortunately, the algorithmic nature of social media means that denials rarely reach as far as accusations. Big U tried to address rumors directly by going on Vlad TV in August 2020, stating unequivocally that he built peace with Nipsey and had not broken it. Yet the damage was already done. His positive mentions in the conversation about Nipsey and Big U dropped from 80% in 2018 to 35% in 2023, as over 5,000 posts spread rumors. The reputation he had spent years building was delegitimized. By 2023, the sentiment analysis on X shows the decline. Positive mentions fell, and negative posts exploded. The narrative of a mafia-like operation under the influence of a criminal organization took shape, even though no concrete evidence existed. The RICO allegations in March 2025 added further complications. Big U was arrested on 43 federal counts under RICO, accusing him of extortion, human trafficking, bank fraud, and orchestrating a murder. He pleaded not guilty and now represents himself after his attorney withdrew. The trial scheduled for May 2026 will see him at the center of a legal battle that further complicates his public perception. Meanwhile, the Henley family is fighting for the right to mourn. The federal charges have frozen their assets, including their homes in Hyde Park. The family is coordinating private funeral arrangements under a memorial tent scheduled for November 8th. The story is that of a father already on the brink of life behind bars, grieving the loss of a son, while the internet celebrates what it believes is justice or karma. This juxtaposition highlights how grief can be manipulated by an algorithmic feed that thrives on sensationalism. The broader lesson here is a cautionary tale about how digital platforms can distort complex human stories. The online conversation about revenge, retaliation, and karma is a simplified version of reality. It disregards the layers of history, community engagement, and personal sacrifice that go into the lives of people like Big U. When the internet spins narratives without fact-checking, it amplifies baseless claims, tarnishing reputations, and interfering with justice processes. In the end, the narrative of Jabari Henley's murder is still ongoing. LAPD's investigation is ongoing. The partial match to a Hoover affiliate suggests that the crime might have roots in spillover conflict, not the retaliatory narrative that the internet promotes. It's a subtle but crucial difference. The story of Nipsey Hussle's brother, Big U, is now further complicated by federal charges. The community's perception has shifted from a peacemaker to a suspect, illustrating how quickly reputations can turn when rumors take hold. It is essential to note that these developments highlight how the internet has fundamentally altered our relationships with grief, justice, and truth. The Henley family, now dealing with asset freezes, legal battles, and a broken bond with their father, must continue to navigate the painful process of mourning and legal uncertainty. Their story is not just about the loss of a son. It is about how the digital age can magnify trauma, misinterpret history, and create narratives that are detached from reality. In closing, this story illustrates how a single piece of misinformation can spread through a digital ecosystem, affecting countless lives. The Henley family, Big U's legal battles, the community's grief, and the LAPD's investigation intertwine in a web of complexity that the internet has made visible yet distorted. As we follow these threads, we must remember that the truth is often buried beneath layers of algorithmic noise and sensational headlines. We see the consequences of misinformation in the lives of those who have been unfairly labeled, in the families who have lost loved ones, and in the communities that have had their peace disrupted. The story remains incomplete, and the justice system continues to grapple with the reality behind the viral headlines. The night the footage went live, a hush fell over the streets of South Los Angeles, a silence that felt almost sacrilegious in a city that had grown accustomed to noise. The clip, a grainy, shaky recording that seemed to have been taken from a hidden camera, showed a man moving through a dimly lit alley, a face framed by a hood, a glint of a gun tucked beneath his coat.
You actually knocked Nipsey Hussle out during their fight.
First time they first fall out, when they first got Nipsey signed, Nipsey come back, was a fallout. They went down, there was a fight, rumble happened. I believe Big U knocked Nipsey out. Blacc Sam comes out, fires 3.
For many who watched it, the image was a confession. For others, a spark that would ignite a fire of rumors and outrage that spread faster than any viral headline could predict. In the days that followed, the feed grew louder. Shares multiplied,
comments erupted, and headlines appeared in every major outlet, each one framing Big U as a villain. Yet the legal paperwork filed at the courthouse said something different. 43 federal counts, a RICO indictment, accusations of extortion, human trafficking, bank fraud, and orchestrated murder. In the courtroom, his attorneys had abandoned him, leaving him to navigate a maze of procedural rules and legal jargon on his own. A plea, not guilty, hung in the air like a flag that had yet to be unfurled. The Henley family's struggle unfolded in parallel, a quiet drama that often goes unnoticed amid the clamor of the internet. The federal charges that froze the family's assets, homes, cars, even a modest business in Hyde Park, struck a heavy blow to their financial foundation. The parents, grappling with the sudden loss of a son, now found themselves locked in a battle against the system that had not only denied them a private funeral, but had also turned their assets into collateral for a case they had no direct connection to. They had already planned a modest funeral, a memorial tent set for November 8th, a space to mourn without the intrusion of a press gallery. The date seemed like a small anchor in the shifting sands of grief. But as the court dates approached, their anxiety turned into a cacophony of legal notices, subpoenas, and a court's order that the family's assets remain in limbo until the case's resolution.
The sense of being dragged through the legal system while trying to honor the memory of a child created a pressure that no one could have anticipated. The internet's role in this tragedy is almost surreal. Algorithms, designed to capture attention, have a way of magnifying the most sensational parts of a story while stripping away the nuance. In this case, the algorithm's love for a simple narrative, a young man, a presumed act of revenge, a criminal, dropped a filter on the complex reality of a man who had been a peacemaker in his community, a man who was now being painted as the villain. The narrative became a feed that many swore by. The truth became a footnote. Meanwhile, the LAPD investigation was still in its early days. While the media had been quick to associate the murder with a Hoover affiliate, the evidence suggested a more complicated web of motives. Some witnesses spoke of a spillover conflict, a chain of events that began not with a personal vendetta, but with broader gang tensions. The partial match of the perpetrator to a known member of the Hoover organization hinted at a possible involvement, but it stopped short of a definitive claim that the crime was retaliation. The detectives were still piecing together motives, looking for a motive that might not be as simple as revenge. This is crucial because the public, already primed to see the story through a binary lens of good versus evil, had no time to contemplate the layers of complexity. The juxtaposition of the family's private sorrow and the public's digital noise was stark. On one side, a mother cradled her son's photograph, whispering his name into the night, praying for his soul. On the other, a feed was filling with emojis and memes about karma and justice that turned a personal loss into a collective spectacle. The Henley family's grief was not merely personal, it was being consumed by an algorithm that turned private sorrow into public entertainment. The family's fight for a private funeral, an act of dignity and respect, was drowned in the roar of social media outrage, making their grief even more public. The story of the viral footage of Nipsey Hussle's brother taking revenge on Big U has become a case study in how misinformation can spread through a digital ecosystem. One piece of footage can spark a chain of posts that twist, bend, and ultimately distort the original narrative. The footage, which was a key element for many viewers, was taken in a context that is rarely shown. No witnesses, no corroborating evidence, no clear audio to prove the identity of the person. Yet it was enough to create a narrative that seemed to fit the algorithm's preference for a clear, simple storyline. The truth became buried beneath layers of algorithmic noise and sensational headlines. In the courtrooms, Big U's legal team, though now absent, had been trying to present a different story. They argued that the charges were an overreach, that the evidence was flimsy, that the indictment was designed to punish a man who had once been a community leader. The defense, though weak due to the lack of representation, still raised procedural questions: the use of informants, the chain of custody of evidence, and the reliability of the forensic data presented. In the public sphere, these legal arguments were drowned in the flood of sensationalist commentary that the internet loves. The community's perception of Big U had changed in a matter of weeks. Once a peacemaker who organized neighborhood block parties, who stood in solidarity with victims, he became a suspect in a federal case. The speed at which narratives change on social media is both a testament to its power and a warning about its fragility. A single post, a single clip, can alter the collective perception in a way that can outlast any factual correction. The narrative that the internet spun, an image of a son avenging a brother, a man stepping into darkness for a single night, ignored the layers of history that had defined these families for years. The Henley family, for instance, had spent decades building a community, a place where their children could learn and play without fear. The loss of a son was not just a single tragic event, it was the unraveling of a life that had been carefully curated over time. The digital age magnified that trauma, taking the story out of context and spreading it like a wildfire. In the end, the truth remains elusive. The story of Jabari Henley's murder is still unfolding, the LAPD's investigation ongoing. Big U's case will be decided by a jury that must sift through a web of facts and misinformation. The community's grief is real, and the internet's role in shaping that grief cannot be ignored. The story illustrates the broader lesson that digital platforms can distort even the most personal of human experiences, turning grief into spectacle, justice into a hashtag, and truth into a footnote. The Henley family, the legal battles, the community's mourning, and the police investigation all intersect in a complex web that the internet has made visible yet distorted. Each thread is a story in its own right, but together they form a tapestry that is incomplete and often contradictory. As we follow these threads, it is vital to remember that the truth is often buried beneath layers of algorithmic noise and sensational headlines. The internet has made it easier for misinformation to spread, but it has also made it possible to hold those responsible accountable, to scrutinize the narratives that emerge, and demand a more nuanced, humane conversation. In sum, the tragic murder of Jabari Henley, the sweeping allegations against Eugene Big U Hutton, the paralysis of a family caught in the crossfire of federal proceedings, and the ongoing police investigation together paint a picture of a community whose grief and pursuit of justice have been amplified and distorted by an unfiltered digital landscape, underscoring the urgent need for a careful, fact-based dialogue that respects the lived experiences and complexities that lie beneath every headline.